Had to do mine quietly this time, unfortunately.
At least on my end, it looked like it was the same time, but
Who
we'll find
knows?
out.
We've been having internet issues, so who knows who's really
We have
counting
been
it
having
down
a lot
right.
of internet issues. It
Um,
has been up and down.
so welcome back, everyone. Luke brought a fun one to the table today. He wants to talk about running. We tried to
Mm,
have extra fun with this and not discuss anything beforehand to truly see who sits on what side of this. But
yeah.
I'll let you dive into specifics. I mean, because I know we want to talk about adults and we also want to talk about youth athletes or just athletes in general. Um, but what are your thoughts? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, this is a weird one. I would say like we could start in a lot of different ways. We could start about like actually training, like running and sprinting, and then like training, strength training for runners or sprinters. I think that's another thing too. We could dive into, but I would say maybe even more the specifics of like strength and conditioning should also the title should also be like speed coach or whatever, strength conditioning and speed and agility or whatever. Like I think it encompasses more than what most people think of when you think of a strength coach, because at the end of the day, no one else is going to be teaching that running unless you're a track coach, and then you can get into more of the specifics of that. But then we could maybe argue that that's not the case either. I don't know. But I think in some ways, I think we try to structure it too much, and running is like, in my opinion, a basic human movement that everyone should be doing. Everyone should be running. Everyone should be able to run. Um, Now, I don't know if like you could get into specifics of how to run and how to run better and more efficiently. I think there's ways for you to coach that, but I think, in my opinion, we try to put too much structure and do too many drills that are focusing on one little part of a running movement or a mechanic that I don't think is really going to be worth the time that we're using, if that makes sense.
I would agree if you look at it through a strength and conditioning lens. I look at it, so we've talked about this before. Our modalities, I guess, are a bit different now. Whereas you're in
Yeah.
person, I do online work. I would call what I do now more personal training than strength coaching. I still call myself a strength coach though.
Hmm.
Um, and that's a whole other can of worms we'll open a different time. But um, I think a lot of strength and conditioning coaches do try to play the role of speed and agility coach and really try to lean unnecessarily heavily into the conditioning component of it.
Hmm.
I think that happens a lot. But starting with, for me, I think the simplest population to look at is adult clients. I disagree that we structure it too much. Again, I'm looking at it for adult clients on the personal training side. I
Yeah.
don't think we structure it too much because I know many people out there say, I want to get in shape, so I'm going to start running. And they don't track their mileage, they don't track
Yeah.
time. They just say, I haven't ran in forever, and I'm going to do this 2 mile route. I'm going to do it every morning to help me get fit, help me get in shape. And it's like, so you're going from 0 to 60, beating up your joints unnecessarily with uncontrolled mileage and uncontrolled pacing. Yikes. Yikes. And we've heard that happen with youth athletes too, right? Parents meaning to do well get their kids running every day to help add on to the strength and conditioning that the kid's
Yeah.
getting. And the kid says, I think I have shin splints. This kind of hurts, kind of bothers me. And then we say, well, what did you do? And we find out that they added on a run to our strength and conditioning session. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's an added stress to the body. I need to know that before I dose some of
Yeah.
these things. So I would argue that it's not structured enough because, again, looking at adult clients, they just kind of take to it. I agree that it is a basic human movement until you get into the sport of it, track and field. But I think it needs more help in terms of the prescription of it with adult clients so that they can find success with it. And I hope I'm not misquoting here. I might eat my words, but I think a long time ago I heard it in a Mike Boyle textbook or could have been in a social media post, not sure. But it's you don't run to get in shape, you have to be in shape to run. I believe that to be
Oh, wow.
pretty, and again, he might have borrowed it from another coach or I might be misquoting, entirely possible. But the premise being you don't get in shape by going out and running. You build strength, you work on short intervals, you build up so that you can run. Again, probably the quote was
Wow.
probably intended more for those in the running sector, running athletes. Again, you build up that mileage, you build up that tolerance. But yeah, with adult clients, I think it's not prescribed. It's not structured enough to keep clients safe a lot of the times.
Man, that is, I didn't even think about that. So I'm really happy that we didn't talk about this beforehand, because that was like, I mean, for me, thinking about like tracking and managing that, especially for adult clients, and even like kids and youth and in high school and college, like you want to be able to see progress and track things over time. Because if you're not tracking those things, you can never see where the maintenance is, or where the weaknesses are, or what is going on that's not, um, you're like shooting. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like an analogy here. Like you don't have one target. You have like five targets, because you can't,
Potentially.
like, you know,
Yeah,
because
I
you
mean,
don't have,
go ahead.
no, just because there's no fine, like tracking maintenance piece in mind. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm trying to word this better, but
That's one of the things that I can't believe I'm saying this, but one of the things that I appreciate about cardiovascular training is that in the way that you track mileage, and the way that you track pace, and the way that you track heart rates and heart rate zones, if you're into that, it's no different. I mean, it is, but it carries similar weight to tracking pounds or
yeah,
kilos in the weight room. That's how we measure progression. And the same is true of running. So it's not just like, well, I went out and I ran, coach. How far did you run? I don't know. I do this loop. At what speed did you run? I don't know. It took me X amount of time to do this loop. And it's like, that's not that's not miles per hour. That's not minutes per mile. It's not any kind of pace. I don't have any point of reference, right? So, are we trying to beat a time? Are we trying to get to a top end speed? What about this conditioning component is
sure.
it that we want to
Yeah.
measure, manage, and progress? So I find, yeah, with adults, it's wildly not prescribed enough. And again, I know we're talking about running, but if the goal is conditioning, who says we have to run? We can get on a rower, we can get on a bike, elliptical if you have one handy. There's tons of modalities
Yeah.
that don't beat up the joint. So why are we looking to running as the end all be all of conditioning? I don't think it makes sense. Again, I'm looking at adult clients when I say this. If the goal is better cardiovascular health, I don't think we have to run. If the goal is, I don't know, pick whatever adaptation you want. Like it's there's so many other better options. Um, so yeah, for adult clients, that's where I said I think running, don't love it. If someone comes to me and wants to run, that's a different story because that is the
Sure.
goal. We can work towards that goal. But if it's like I want to get in better shape, I build this program and it has conditioning components in it, and they say, well, when are we going to run? It's like I didn't even know you wanted to run. You said you want to be in better shape. That to me doesn't mean run. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
No, that's good. I think that's, what's then you get into goals again, and getting into like what specifics do you really want from this training? Is it to be a better runner, or is it to be in better shape and to look better? Because you can look better and not run. You know what I mean? And for me personally, if I started running, I would lose all the muscle that I've tried for the last 7 years to build. So it's like,
would you?
it's I well, I think for me, I would.
That's
Just
a
like my metabolism. That's a good point. That's a good point.
that's a can of worms we can save for
No
another
one's
another
gonna come
time.
out and be like, "I run every day. I'm a CrossFit athlete. I do all this crazy shit, and look at me." But
Yeah, that's long been a. I guess we might as well dive into it since we're going to be talking about running in this episode. But
yeah,
a lot of people, clients, will say, "Well, should I run first or should I lift first?" To which, again, my whole line of questioning is to simplify everything so that I clearly understand your expectations and you clearly understand what's physiologically possible. Because I don't want you
yeah,
to, set out say one thing and you expect this. It means something different to you, right? We have to be on, we have to be on the same terms. So, yeah, should I do lifting first? Should I do cardio first? And I pause and I say, what's more important to you? Do you want to
yep,
be in better cardiovascular shape, or do you want to get, gain strength or muscle mass? They're not mutually exclusive, in my opinion. They're not mutually exclusive, but there's only a certain amount of energy you have. There's only a certain amount of hours in the day. So what adaptation are we chasing harder, right? Like if
yeah,
someone is, say, let's say they're overweight and they have a desk job and they don't get many steps. I might focus on the conditioning piece for them first. I might focus on the strength training first. It depends on the individual, depends on a lot of other things. But I mean, you know, I would say start with what is most important to the end you're trying to reach.
Yeah. And I guess that goes back to kind of drills and the stuff that we were talking about too with like the running. I guess for me, I was thinking of like a youth athlete or like a middle school, even high school athlete. I would even argue college in some settings, but um, I think there's too much structure for them when it needs to be more of a like playing environment, in my opinion, and then just like learning by doing. Um, Now, I would say with adult athletes, and we have a lot of adult athletes or clients that come in and want to do these different things for their sports that they're playing, like their rec sports, or some of them are in some pretty competitive leagues and different things, and they want to still be able to have some of that spring and run and jump and cut. And so we'll do some of that stuff, but it definitely is a lot more structured for them, and it has a lot more one-on-one, like really specific coaching, because they can understand that a lot more than like a youth athlete, I would say. But I think that's just my opinion of what I've been seeing a lot, and how I like to coach is I like to let them do and let them move and run at really high speeds and see where things start to kind of fall off, and then try to coach that versus starting with a drill and then moving into something that's specific to that drill, and then like, I don't know, that like for me is like there's too much there, too much like progression. I would just say like, let's make it simple and let's do that simple. And then if we need to coach after that, then we'll coach after that.
I agree that there should be time for play. There should be time for exploration around speed. Um, I'll disagree in that it needs, I think you said less structure,
Mm-hmm.
because to those listening, in my opinion, big difference between agility work and power work, acceleration work, and conditioning work. Those are not the same thing. Accelerating and exerting a massive amount of force to get up to speed will not come at the same point in a workout as would more steady state oxidative conditioning work. Because let's say, and you can get away with that with kids, maybe, kind of jumbling around the order. I don't think you should, but you could get away with it. When you look at older clients, if I have someone do classic 5x5 on a barbell back squat, and I mean to full depth, boots to glutes down, and it's just, we're shredding their legs, right? And I mean, we're doing Nordic curls the whole nine. We get to the end of the day and I say, all right, now we're going to go into our acceleration work. If I were a betting man, a hamstring is going to roll up that client's leg, right? Because we've
Yeah.
now not respected the physiology of exercise order. That absolutely matters. So
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there needs to be structure around running components. Speed should not, for the most part, there's always exceptions, for the most part, should not come at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Oxidative work should not come first thing in the day. Again, this is now talking about athletics. This is not talking about adult clients. So it's very, I'm
Yeah.
talking within context here. In no world should an athlete be running 18 tempos to start their strength training day. Oh my gosh. Can you
Yeah.
imagine how much, especially in the heat of summer, again, just using our experience, how miserable would that athlete be if you put them under a barbell after doing 18 tempo runs? They'd hate you. They wouldn't want
Yeah.
to come back, right? And it's unwise and it's unsafe. So I do think there has to be structure. Again, it depends on what age we're talking about. There is a time
Yeah.
for play. There is a time for that competitive aspect of it. Absolutely. But you gotta tell the athletes when that time is. You dictate when that is as the coach. It's not just like, hey, let's come into the weight room and play med ball, volleyball, and just have a fun day. Again, it depends on the age range. It depends on where we're at in the season. There's so many factors, but
Yeah.
just painting in broad strokes here, I think it does need to be structured. And you can
Yes.
certainly leave that time for play, but it has to be with purpose because everything else is
Yeah.
built out around it.
No, yeah, I think, yeah, and what stimulus you want. I think the wording is wrong, and words are important. So that's a good point to like delineate that, right? Because I don't think maybe structure is not the right word, because there has to be a lot of structure, right? But maybe like simple is a better word, or simplified or something,
I would agree. It has to be
because
simplified. I would agree with that.
it's like the structure piece, it has to be there. Like you have to have the game plan going in, like what the stimulus you want is, whether that's like full speed, max speed, velocity work, whether that's acceleration work, whether that's change of direction, whether that's like jumping, leaping, leap, jump, bound, leaping. We've talked about that on another podcast, but um, I think it's those kind of things, right? And you have to have a plan, and you have to kind of work with the group that you have, and for me, I guess like simplifying that would just be, I think, like, and we can have this conversation too. And this is something that I struggle with this a lot, is if the stimulus is to run fast, then why not just run fast the whole time versus like doing like drills and things to work on the mechanics of the running, when you could just run fast and get the stimulus you want. And I think it's context specific. I know we used to work with a lot of hockey players, and hockey's a sport that's not on you know
Not on dry
turf or
land.
not on grass, right? So like
Yeah.
the action is going to be a lot different than the actual action of running. So for me, I always thought that I'm not going to waste my time going over running mechanics with an ice hockey player, because it doesn't matter to them, and it's not going to transfer the same way. But then you can have arguments too that, like, if you run faster, it's going to help you on the ice. I don't know. It's an interesting kind of like, what is it, like the egg or the chicken or whatever? You know what I mean? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. Like
The chicken and egg paradox.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like what do you spend your time doing? Is it more important to do like the mechanics and get like the like everything down to like a perfection part of that, or just like, is it better to just run fast?
I would push I'd push back a little bit, but before I do that, you bring up an important principle, one that we as strength and conditioning coaches have to respect. The SAID principle, specific adaptations to impose demands. Meaning if you want to get faster at running, I'm not going to throw you in a pool. And if you
Yeah.
want to get faster on a bike, barbell benching will not be the unlock that gets you there. If you want to get better at something, do that something.
Yeah.
So I agree that is key. And without getting too into specifics, because I do want to respect the place that we used to work at, and and their systems and processes, there are some things that we have done that may not translate as ideally as putting on skates. That
Yeah.
is just the natural of strength and conditioning on dry land. There are, though, nuances in acceleration that we have coached that can help to carry over in terms of the attack angle. So there are some things that
Yeah.
do have those specific adaptations, though nothing that we do on dry land will correlate as well as, and we were talking about this before the pod, nothing will correlate as well as the skill itself as, like getting on the ice. So the point I disagree at is, and only slightly, I think you're right in a lot of ways, is if the goal is to get fast, let's just run fast. If you do that as hard as you can for as long as you can, at some point you reach a point of diminishing return. And you want to polish up the parts of your game that need polishing up, and the ones that are already pretty well off, leave those be. Meaning if you're really good once you're at top end, I'm not going to try to extend your top end speed out if you're already at the event distance. Like that's a waste of my time. If you can cross that
Yeah.
finish line at your full speed, why do I need to have you go another 10, 20, 30 meters? I might need to work on your acceleration though. Maybe you're slow off the blocks. So the key isn't just, well, run fast. Okay, now run fast again. There are certain components that we do have to break down. Um, but I do agree that it comes down to simplicity. Like, we do need to focus on the skill, but we do need to part that skill out at high levels. Again, I wouldn't do this with a middle schooler. I wouldn't do this with a high schooler. I might do it with a pro guy, right? We watch some footage back, we replay it, we look at, their attack angle, their rate of rise. We look at all these different things and talk about some of
Yeah.
those things. But again, that's at a very high level. No kid athlete needs to that much breakdown, you
Yeah.
know. But
Yeah.
different systems. This is why we do this.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely why we do this. And I'm sure that like there's a lot of people that have different opinions than us on this, and That's why I think there's a whole part of our industry that just is like speed, agility, quickness coaches. And I also think that like there's some of that stuff, I definitely don't agree with like doing a lot of the drills that we were just talking about, and trying to like over coach that piece of like our programming. But I guess it's like if you make all your money and you go 60 minutes on just speed and agility, then yeah, you're gonna have to dive in a little bit more into the mechanics, right, and that kind of stuff. Um, I don't know. I don't know. It's just an interesting thought, you know.
I'm kind of torn on it because I think of, in my opinion, one of the best to talk speed and agility in our field, Lee Taft.
Yeah.
Love his content. Big fan of his content because it's simple, it's applicable, it's effective, and it obeys like human physiology, right? He's not having people do these crazy wild things. I mean, it's simple stuff done extremely well
Yeah.
consistently over time. Love his content. So I mean, if a guy like that comes to a session with you and he has 60 minutes of speed and agility work, I'm going to listen for every minute that he's talking, every
Absolutely.
single minute. Um, so people that lean hard into that expertise, yeah, they're gonna dive into a lot of the nuance that, I'll be honest, would fly right over my head.
Sure.
And then I think you have people on the other side of the spectrum that say they coach speed and agility and couldn't tell you about a plyo step or a crossover or a directional step. And it's like, but you do this for a living. What do you mean you don't? Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, there are people on both sides of the field, and I don't know. It's a bummer when you see someone that's not doing it as well as their marketing suggests that they
Sure.
should be. And I'm not pointing anyone out. I'm not. I haven't seen that in a while. Again, I'm more on the personal training side of things as opposed to the strength and conditioning side now. But there are a lot of coaches out there that'll sell their speed and agility all
Yeah.
day long.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, I think and then it goes into your marketing and what we think of as a speed coach and what a speed coach should do. Like, is a speed coach like when you close your eyes and think of a speed coach, do you think of somebody just coaching like high knees or something, or like an A skip?
could
You know
see
what I
that.
mean? Like that's what like or like a speed ladder, right? Like those are the things that I kind of think of when I close my eyes and think of a speed coach. Um, and I don't know. I just guess I just think it's how you because I would consider myself a professional in speed and agility and strength and conditioning, and I just think I am a lot different than other people in this field in that aspect. But I still think that I definitely would bet all the money in the world that I can still get someone faster. I can still get someone um, it better agility for their sport, or whatever their goal is to get to that point. If it's speed, agility, change of direction, whatever that is, I am very certain that I can do it, but it's just going to be very different than maybe someone else's approach, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to your systems and processes, and we've talked about this before. Pardon me if I get long-winded here. Play me off stage if I do. But within strength and conditioning, there's two halves to that: strength and the conditioning side. So we talked about running later, which is like the tempo runs, the steady state distance runs, whatever. The conditioning side of it, and you could argue that there's short bursts within conditioning too. You can focus on short intervals. Absolutely. The strength side of it, I think, is where the power and agility comes from when we're talking about running. If you don't have strength, you can't produce force. If you can't produce force, you cannot be quick. Boom. There's your sound clip. I mean, it's
Yeah.
that is it in a nutshell. If you can't put force into the ground, you'll never get it back to get where you want to go quickly. So it comes from lifting consistently, being able to produce that force. It comes from tendon tolerance and stiffness. It comes from
Yeah.
running the drills and the specific adaptations that you're after. But again, it's not like we're doing 60 minutes of drills.
Yeah.
We're fitting that speed work into a very select part of the day so that it follows physiologically what we need and what the body can put out. Yeah, it's not like I'm taking someone through 60 minutes of drills. It it depends on what sport we're talking about
Yeah.
because a lot of skills coaches, speed is kind of built into the sport in some ways. Yes, we still need
Yeah.
to work on it, strength and conditioning. But if I'm looking at soccer or if I'm looking at football, it's a game of match my opponent.
Hmm.
How many times in practice are you chasing someone? Are you working on cutting? Are you working
Yes.
on your your own drills. I don't need to spend time with you doing that. I need to
Yeah.
make you as durable as possible so that when you go into those drills, you can put force in the ground effectively. So yeah, it depends on what sport we're talking about. And I don't know, I'm just talking again. We're now down the rabbit hole of athletes, so I'm just kind of naming sports in general. But tennis, agility is built into the practice of that sport. That is part
Yeah.
of playing the sport. Um, Looking at jujitsu, nothing we do in the weight room is going to help you develop jujitsu specific speed, like rolling on the mat itself. Just
Yes.
nothing,
Yeah.
nothing. I mean, so part of speed and agility is just built into specific adaptations that impose demands, doing the darn thing,
Hmm.
in my opinion.
Yeah. No, that's a good. I mean, we're on the same page there for sure. I think that was an interesting point too. I was just thinking about like practice, and I used to sit in on a lot of practices, and I'm just thinking about like how much of that time is really coached on speed, you know? And I would say never. It's never coached. Like nobody's ever coaching speed unless you're a track coach, right? But they are coaching the specifics of like maybe it's a speed thing into like whatever the drill is that they're trying to elicit for the sport, or like you know what I mean. Like if it's soccer, I'm just thinking of like something that's like maybe it's like a fast break in soccer and they're doing something and it's like a long ball and they have to run to the long ball and that ball might be 20 yards away and they have to sprint to it, right? Like there's stuff like that, and like finding the right angle to the ball and things, you can coach that up. But almost never they're going to coach up like your hand technique and where your chest is and how high your knees are. You know what I mean? Like some of the things that we kind of talk about. But I guess that's an important thing to maybe have a little bit of time to educate people on. I wouldn't take a lot, like I'm not going to take a whole session to talk about those things, but maybe, five minutes, 5 minutes out of my 60-minute section, but whatever.
It
I guess,
depends. Go
yeah,
ahead.
it depends. Yeah. The last thing I was thinking of was speed and running, and just running for athletes and running for adults is it's something that comes quickly and then you lose it even quicker, right? So if you're not running a lot, I think it's something that um, like what do they, man, I'd have to pull some research out, but like a week, like you if you stop sprinting, specifically sprinting, like you'll lose your speed like significantly fast, like within the week or within a week or two of not doing it. It's like it's a lot more significant than strength work is, right? If you take like a month off of strength work, you'll probably be similar to where your strength gains have been. But if you take a month off of sprinting, that's like out the window. You know what I mean?
I mean, I guess the question I have would be what can we attribute those losses in performance to? Right? Because if we're talking sprinting, that's very different than a cardiovascular adaptation,
Yeah.
right?
I mean,
Sprinting,
we could say long distance running. I think long distance running is the same thing because it's the cardiovascular component. Like you lose that ability. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like if you go a month without running, and let's say you're going back into, and you're somebody that like regularly runs, you're talking about this loop that you've been doing, and then you take a month off, and then you do it again after a month, and you could be strength training, you could be doing all these different things, but if you're not running and you go back into running, like it's going to be a lot worse, I think.
yeah, the devil's advocate piece I was trying to lean into though is, um, I don't know, when people think running, I think that their go-to is conditioning. And when you
Yeah.
say sprinting, again, my mind goes to that's fast twitch muscle fibers. That's an
Mhm.
anaerobic adaptation, not an aerobic one. So not all running is built the same. Running is not running is not running. Again, back to that quote, you don't run to get in shape, you have to be in shape to run. So figure out what adaptation is it that you're after. Is it to get fast? You'll lose that one quick if you don't stay up with it. I would argue that cardiovascular adaptations stay on for a bit longer. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, just those different adaptations to the same task, running,
Yeah.
are just I think really fascinating and interesting because not all running is built the same. It's just an interesting point worth I think people should kind of consider and weigh out.
Man, that's a good like clip that one too and talk about that and post that later. I think that's a good, not all running's built the same. And maybe that's kind of what we've been trying to circle around this whole time is like acceleration works different than like than full speed sprinting, different than long distance sprinting, different than change of direction and agility, and it's all like technically it's all running, right? You're all doing like the same movement of like moving your body in that way, but it's completely different, right?
Track and field coaches are going to be running their head through a wall listening to us talk about running. They're gonna be like,
Mike
these
Petro, what's
yahoos.
up? Coach Mike, please
Shout
hit
out.
us up. Shout out our good friend of ours
He's just going to bring
that might
research
be listening.
articles and shred us to bits after listening to this.
It'll be good. Then maybe we could talk about it in our next pod. That'd be kind of fun too.
We're going to get schooled quick.
It's fun that and then it's those things where you kind of educate yourself and or re-educate yourself and kind of figure out what the next step is, because I'm sure that's the best thing about podcasts and like blog posting and different things that I like to do. And I look back on some of the training I've done like 10 years ago, and I'm like, man, like, how dumb am I to be doing some of this stuff? But then I'm also on the other side. I'm like, well, I didn't know any of that stuff, and it made me stronger and it made me faster and whatever, even if it was like the dumbest stuff in the world. So I think it's just interesting to, you can still do things like sometimes driven by analysis, like what's it called?
Paralysis
Paralysis
by
by analysis.
analysis.
There it is. Yeah. Like that's a real thing too,
True. Yeah, I like to look at some like the old workouts that I wrote up, and it's like, man, I was in a different place then, a different place. But
I mean, yeah, like here's a good example. I loved soccer in high school. It was like basically my main sport. And then I kicked on the football team and played a couple other sports as well, like baseball and swimming. But soccer was my main. And I really wanted to get better at soccer. And I just thought if I run like a cross country athlete and I do all this running and I run up all these stairs and I do it like Rocky, I'm going to be a better soccer player. And like that was never the case. And I was this scrawny kid and I was a goalie too. So like I never had to run for the sport ever. Like the most I would run is like 18 yards in the 18-yard box. And I definitely think that hindered my performance some, but like I still was like, I still had great years of college or high school soccer and even played in adult and stuff. So I don't know.
the game of continued ed at all times.
That's life, right?
Ain't it though?
Yeah. If you got this far, I appreciate you guys listening and hearing us banter about some things that are on our mind. And yeah, please share your thoughts, concerns, questions, whatever you want us to talk about, and keep listening to the Relax Rep podcast. 3, 2, 1.
Perfect.
See you guys.